Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. We'll start. My name is Sayyid Saad Qadri, and I will be giving you the history of Palestine. Extremely important for people to understand because a lot of the time we're only looking at the last 75 years of the history without realizing that this land is a very old piece of land which was occupied, preoccupied, whatever it is, over the period of time, thousands of years, by different people. And it has the status of a holy land for several different faiths. So it's extremely important to understand the prehistory of it prior to 1948, because a lot of the time we are only concentrating on 1948 onwards or 1917 onwards, whatever it is around World War I onwards. So it's very important to understand that this particular piece of land called Palestine, which is right here on this slide on the right-hand side. This is fairly, a newer version of the map. And as you can see, that the recent historical accounts where Jerusalem became the capital of Israel, that was not the case. And in 2017, US recognized it to be the capital of Israel. So we'll be looking at how this all happened. Prior to Jerusalem becoming the capital of Israel, it was Tel Aviv, the red circle that you see over here. So if you are looking at the map, and where you see Israel right over here, that's exactly where the Palestine is in context of the Arabia. So this is north of Saudi Arabia by the Red Sea. In the same line down, you have Medina and Mecca, the same line down by the Red Sea. And right up there, you have Jordan, Israel, and right above Israel, you have Syria. And over here, you have Egypt. So Israel connects to the Africa. And this is a bit of how things are now to greater extent. Well, this corner is the Gaza Strip. And this is part of Palestine. And this green area that you see, that's called West Bank. Well, all of this is not Palestine. There are small pieces of Palestine within the West Bank. So there's Palestine, Israel, then Palestine, Israel. Sometimes there are two villages. You have to go from one village to another, and there are both Palestinian villages, but you have to go through Israel to go through to the neighboring village because the land in between the two villages is Israel's. So that doesn't mean this whole green region is Palestine. So there is Palestine somewhere over here. And the Gaza Strip is where we see currently the war going on. This is the only part of Palestine that is connected with the sea route. Otherwise, the rest of the Palestine is in bits and pieces. How did it all happen? We have to look back historically that, 12th century BC, that's when Egyptians also knew this region by the name of Palestine. And why did they do that? Because scholars believed that is derived from the name of the people who lived in this region, the Philistines, the Philistines. And that's from where we have in Arabic Philistine, which in Latin became Palestine. And this is the whole region that you see over here. That's considered to be Palestine, which is now where you can see Israel and Palestine as in different shaded colors. And there is a historical perspective to this region. This was not a country by itself, even around the World War time, when this country was actually splitted. And that's what we'll be looking at, why this happened. But before you do that, you need to understand these two terms that are often confused. There's a term called Zionist, who are the followers of Zionism, and Jewish, who are the followers of Judaism. Zionist is a person who is of the belief that Israel needs to exist, and we need to make sure that Israel continues to exist, and we need to work in its development and protection. And this person who is of this Zionist thought process does not necessarily have to be Jewish. That is why we see some Jewish people who are not in favor of Israel, and that's why I put these pictures out there so that you can see that there are Jewish people, the followers of Judaism, who reject the Zionism and they do not stand with the state of Israel because they're of the view that God promised us this land and it will be given to us. It's not like we will go and occupy it and kill innocent people. So that's why you need to understand, yes, there are Zionist mindset Jewish, but then there are Zionist mindset people of other faiths also have who are pro-Israel. So Zionism is a thought process, it's not a religion. And Judaism is the religion. So that's why it is extremely important for you to distinguish, because a lot of the time people get confused when they see, okay, why are Jewish people there opposing Israel? So that's the reason, because not all Jewish people are in favor of this. Now, how does this all started? Well, you got to understand, before we come to 1885, in 1600s, there were a lot of people in Europe who started strengthening their grounds in the banking world. They started becoming rich. And over the period of time, they started lending money to the other people who wanted to do business in Europe. And it got to a point where by 1800s, these rich people were funding the governments and they were influencing the governments. And the term Zionism was coined in 1885 by this man by the name of Nathan Birnbaum. And he coined it. And the idea of coining this term was that we are looking for a state of Israel that will be the country of Jewish people. And in 1896, this man by the name of Theodor Herzl, he founded the Zionist movement after the term that was coined earlier. And he said, we need the restoration of the Jewish state. Now, what is this point of restoration? If you look at historically, that Jewish people were not settled in this land until after Musa alayhi salam, Prophet Moses. That's when they, at the time of Yusha ibn Nun, that's when they first settled in this land that became their promised land. But over the period of time, they were exiled from this land through forces coming from outside or living as second or third class citizens in this land. Then there were times that they came in power. There were times that they did not come in power. They were just living there. So over the period of time, a lot of people have lived there and who were Jewish. And even at this time in 1800s, when these calls were being made, there were Jewish people already living in Palestine, but they were not in huge number. Small percentage of them were still living. And here the movement started that wanted a land for themselves. So in 1897, this movement took the form of a very organized group. So they had their first Zionist Congress in 1897. So this organization was founded, and this Congress took place in Basel, Switzerland. And this is the picture from the Congress. As you can see, there are quite a lot of members there, and they have their flags design and everything else is going on. And then comes 1907, when they have started visiting Palestine to take surveys and see what's going on. So they're already planning this. So as you can see, it took several years of planning to come into this land. And then, of course, they wanted to reach the influential people, the political people who were involved in the world politics to help them gain this land. So in 1908, the people in Palestine who were of different faiths, Christians, Jewish, Muslims, all of them were living in Palestine. So one Arab Christian by the name of Najib Nassar, he noticed the Zionist activities are increasing in Palestine. So as a result, he started writing about that in the newspaper, that we are alarmed as to why all of a sudden these activities are increasing. And moving forward to 1915, the British, during the World War I, who needed money to fund the war, and as I told you, The people who were funding these initiatives were the people who had the money and the motive. They wanted a free land, and they were convincing the people in the political arena of the world to help them get this land. So this British cabinet member, Herbert Samuel, he basically calls that the British should take over this land to be handed over to the Zionists. But of course, you know, these are all getting funded from behind. So during World War I, Ottomans were on one side and the British were on the other side, and the war was going on. And all of this region that you see over here, that was agreed in the special agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, that when we defeat the Ottomans, we will divide this land. So the pink land, or the purplish land at the bottom that you see, will be British rule, and some of this will be Arab states under the British rule, and Palestine will be under British, French, and Russian protection. And this purplish area over here, the dark one, will be French rule, and so on and so forth. And then after we take over, we will give a small portion of this land to Turkish people so that they can have their own independent country, and we will dissolve the Ottomans. So this was going on during the war. In 1917, a special declaration called the Balfour Declaration was written and was sent out on the behalf of the British government over to Lord Rothschild, representing the Zionists, that yes, we are in favor of giving a piece of land in the Palestine to the people, to the Zionist people. So this was the Ottoman Empire, as you see in green color all the way, and this is to be divided at the end of the World War I in 1919, and divided in different territories, some semi-autonomous countries, semi-independent countries, some independent lands, some to become colonies, and so on and so forth. So as a result, in 1922, after the World War I was over, the League of Nations created this mandate that whatever was formerly known as Ottoman Empire would now be divided among different allies. So here we will have an independent Republic of Turkey, which will be handed over to Ataturk, and then we will have this purple area of French Mandate of Syria. Then we will have this Lebanon region. Then the British will take over Palestine and some of the surrounding land, including Jordan, and then also Iraq. And the Arabia would then be smaller kingdoms or British occupied areas. So some kind of a mandate was created to take this movement to the next step. Then the Jewish people started moving into this land at that time. But 1933, when Nazis started persecuting the Jewish people, they started moving into Palestine in much larger number. As a result, the Palestinians noticed that these foreigners are coming in huge number, and they were afraid that their land will be lost to these newcomers. As a result, in Palestine, there were riots to force the British people, who are still overlooking this land, to stop this mass immigration. As a result, the British took some measures, and they started decreasing this immigration that was happening from Europe into Palestine, and they started controlling that. And that was because of several different rebellions that took place between 1936 and 1939, and this is before the World War II started. But then in 1937, UK Peel Commission had a report in which they recommended that due to the increased tension, how about if we partition the Palestine? This orangish region will become the Jewish state, and this purplish region will become the Arab state, and all the Jerusalem area will be under the British control, because that's where the holy sites is for the Jewish, the Christians, and the Muslims, so that we can avoid any kind of conflict. No more conflicts. That's why we want this region in green to be under British, and the rest will be Israel. With no name was decided, by the way, back then. There'll be a Jewish state and an Arab state were the names. But in 1939, UK's issues this warning that we will limit the number of Jewish immigrants coming from Europe to the Palestine. So they started limiting that by 1939. However, in 1942, the Zionists met in New York. It was called the Biltmore Program, and they decided that this Jewish state will become part of the Commonwealth, and we want to have an unlimited immigration, and they needed support from the world superpowers, which they received by the 1940s while the World War II was going on. In 1947, UK proposes that it will have this role of taking care of Palestine. However, it is not able to fulfill the role very efficiently. So it will hand over the Palestine to the UN so that the UN can decide what will happen to this big piece of land and how it will be divided, how the peace will be kept in this region, because they are unable to maintain the peace. But what happened? Soon a war broke out. A great Palestine-Israel conflict started. And 1948, April 1948, a place by the name of Deir Yassin, it is a village where massacre happened, and hundreds of Palestinian Arabs were killed, and several of them were displaced from their homes. And that was a beginning of a new era in this region. Several people went into these camps. This was the time of, you will hear this word, Nakba. Nakba is basically the term that is, it's a catastrophe. It's a great setback for the Palestinian people. And the 15th of May is the official day to mark the Palestinian Nakba. Israel declares its independence on this day, and Palestine loses its land and loses its status and goes in the hand of others to decide its fate. And at that time, Great Britain terminates the agreement that we are responsible for this region, so this whole region becomes extremely weak. At that time, UN, in November of 1948, steps forward and says that we will provide funds to relieve 500,000 Palestinian refugees. 1948 December, the UN General Assembly passes a resolution that refugees should be allowed to return back to their land, and Jerusalem will not be controlled by anybody but directly by UN. So that resolution was passed. In February through July of 1949, Israel signs agreements with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. These are the surrounding countries that we will have these temporary borders that we will make. Over the period of time, slowly and gradually, several wars broke out, and those temporary borders became permanent border, and in some cases, secret agreements, exchange of lands allowed Israel to even increase its boundaries from green line temporary to blue line permanent borders. Then moving forward to 1950, Israel decided to move its capital from Tel Aviv over to the Jerusalem, western part of the Jerusalem, and that was against the UN resolution, because UN said Jerusalem cannot be the land where either of the two parties can have an active presence, but they still did that. And this, the West Bank, then was brought formally under the Jordanian control, so the Jordan will be the caretaker of the West Bank, and there were a lot of agreements underhand that took place. In all of these things, I'm telling you so that you understand that a lot of the decisions were made for Palestinians without they were fully involved in the process. And to further seclude them, PLO was formed, Palestine Liberation Organization. It was founded in Cairo in 1964, yet it did not have the status of the representative of all the Palestinians yet. But this organization was formed. The idea was that everybody from outside of the Palestine will only talk to PLO, and PLO will be responsible for taking care of the Palestinians' needs and wants and questions, whatever. Well, in 1967, only 3 years after PLO was formed, a 6-day war broke out. Israel occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Gaza, Golan Heights, which is in Syria, Sinai Peninsula between Egypt and Israel. Israel massively took over this whole area, as you can see. This is all Israel. The dark green color is what Israel was before the war. And in 6 days, this light green area, all of this area was taken by Israel. So now Israel started claiming all this land. But over the period of time, the world intervened, and slowly and gradually they had to leave some of that land out. The UN General Assembly and the Arab League recognized that PLO, that was in 1964, it was created. So within 10 years, it became the representative of Palestinian people. So it was in UN declared like that. In 1978, an agreement was signed between the two leaders. In the center, in the middle, you see the U.S. president. And then this was done in Camp David. And then you see on one side of the U.S. president, Jimmy Carter, on one side you see Egyptian representative, and on the other side you see the Israeli representative. And an agreement was signed to create a framework for peace in the Middle East. And there was a meeting that lasted for 2 weeks at Camp David in USA. But let's move forward. 1981, UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, that decided that from now on, Jerusalem, which is the holy site and the holy city, now becomes the World Heritage Site because of its old buildings and old place. I mean, like, it has a great value, so that great value made it a World Heritage Site. Now, a lot of the people for a very long time thought that this building with the golden dome is Masjid al-Aqsa, which is not right, because this is the Qubbatul Sakhra. This is called the Qubba. Qubba means the dome. Sakhra means under this dome there's a small rock. There's a rock. And because of that, this is called Qubbatul Sakhra, or the Golden Dome Mosque. Right across from it, at a walking distance on the other side, is the Masjid al-Aqsa. I'll try to show you the picture of that later on so that you also know what Masjid al-Aqsa looks like and how this looks like. But anyway, 1987, the Palestinian uprising against Israel, which is called the Intifada. And this occupation of West Bank and Gaza Strip happened, and there was a lot of catastrophe at this point, a lot of mass. It was not easy on Palestinian people. And the Palestinian Authority did have control over some of the areas, but long consequences of this. As you can see now in the West Bank, see how Palestine is spread into smaller pieces. You do not see a continuous flow of green color. You see how divided it is? That's exactly what I was talking about earlier on, that when we are moving from one place to another within this region, they have to first exit out of their village or small town, enter Israel, and then go to their other town or city of their own country. So that's exactly how the West Bank looks like. Even if you look at it, this is a zoom-in map. If you look at a zoom-out map, these are much smaller dots. I don't know if you guys can see these way smaller dots here by this corner where I'm moving my mouse. Those are extremely small villages. And as soon as you step out of that village, that's it. You're out of your country. So 1988, in July, Jordan, which is a neighboring country, it made claims to the West Bank, and it recognized that from this point onwards, PLO is the only organization that we recognize at the world level to communicate with. So we will only communicate with PLO, nobody else. No other organization, nobody else can be representative of Palestinians but PLO. 2017, fast forwarding, US President Donald Trump announces that United States would recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And remember, this happened in 1950, where Israel went against the UN and declared Jerusalem to be its capital. And then in 2017, the US recognized that, yes, it is a capital of Israel, and then moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And of course, all of these things were hurtful for Palestinians. You know, their country and its fate was getting decided by people outside of Palestine, not by Palestinians. So that was a great setback for them. Now, as a result, over the period of time, several different fights broke out. And this is a war that broke out very recently, last month, and between a group, Hamas, which doesn't represent the government of Palestine. It's a separate group that's fighting for the freedom of Palestine. Among the many groups, it's not the only group, and the Israeli government. So as a result, Israel launched an Operation Swords of Iron. And why did Hamas started this war? When Hamas was asked, Hamas said that we started this war because we want to take the revenge for the things that were committed against our women and the violation of the sacred places like Al-Aqsa Mosque and several other incidents that happened in the past. As a result of that, we decided to start it. So going back slowly and gradually, right at the beginning of this, as you saw here, we started out by saying that it is extremely important for you to understand the historical perspective of this region. This region has been very, very important historically. Different people have moved in and moved out of this place. Since many people moved in and moved out, it became the site for many people. Now, at the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam, a ma'bad or haykal of Sulaiman alayhi salam was built over here that started in the life of Dawood alayhi salam, the father of Sulaiman alayhi salam, ended in the life of Sulaiman alayhi salam. We still have one of the walls of that temple standing in Jerusalem, which is called the Wailing Wall. And very close to that Wailing Wall is the Qubbatul Sakhra that I told you about, the Golden Dome. And very close to that is Masjid al-Aqsa. Masjid al-Aqsa has its importance because that's where the Prophet ﷺ led all the prophets in prayers the night of the Mi'raj. And the Qubbatul Sakhra has its importance because that's where Prophet ﷺ did his nightly journey towards the heavens. And of course, the same place, which is of great importance to Muslims, is also that when Muslims started praying in Mecca, they were facing towards Masjid al-Aqsa. So that became their first Qibla. So they were facing towards Masjid al-Aqsa. So from here, this is the map I showed you. This is where Mecca is. So if you are in Mecca, you would be facing towards Jerusalem if you are praying in this direction. Now, when Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina, let me take help from this annotation to help you understand this a little bit better, okay? So this is, let's say, this is Mecca, and this is Medina. I'm just drawing it for the sake of, understanding, okay? So when in Mecca, Prophet ﷺ, so this is Kaaba. So Prophet ﷺ would stand behind the wall of Kaaba, such that the Kaaba will be in his direction and the direction will be towards Bayt al-Maqdis or Jerusalem, where Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, at that time, the Masjid al-Aqsa was not in this form that it is right now, but this whole compound would still be considered Aqsa. The whole compound, everything is a lot of buildings there, a lot of places of great importance. So that's the direction in which Prophet ﷺ used to pray. And that wall is the wall between the Hajar Aswad and the Rukn al-Yamani, which is the corner that faces the Yemen. So when you are completing your tawaf and coming towards the Hajar Aswad, the wall that you cross before you come to the Hajar Aswad, if you're facing that wall, you will be facing towards this rear. Okay, so this is how he would be praying. Now, when he moved to Medina, he would be praying in this direction. So Kaaba was on his back, towards his back, as he was facing north. So Prophet ﷺ secretly made this dua. He never made it out openly, that, oh Allah, I want us to face towards Mecca, so that was the first house of worship where everybody used to pray towards from Adam alayhi salam onwards, before you changed it to Masjid al-Aqsa. So then in one prayer, Prophet ﷺ, in the middle of the Zuhr prayer, was ordered to change the direction. And that is, as you can see, if he's praying in this direction, he would have to move 180 degrees and move in this direction. And that is still marked in Medina. There is a masjid called Masjid Qiblatain. That is the masjid in which the direction changed from here to here. And you can see the two markings in that masjid. So this area became the first Qibla for the Muslims to pray towards in the earlier years of Islam. And then later on, we started praying towards Mecca. So it has a great significance that way for Muslims. And also Christians have their old churches and some of the other places where they believe that Isa alayhi salam, in his lifetime, he spent time in those places. So they have their own little significance of this place. So just wanted to share that significance from the perspective of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ and importance of that place for Muslims. As to them, it is the place where they prayed the first several years of Islam. Prophet ﷺ did his heavenly journey from this place. And this is the place where Prophet ﷺ led all the prophets in prayers and received the title of Imam al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen. And also it is a sacred place for the Jewish people, also a sacred place for the Christian people. And we talked about the difference between that not all Jewish people are in favor of the state of Israel. So then we talked about that over the period of time, how politically this area was jeopardized by different people starting in 1800s. It all started coming slowly and gradually. Different groups were formed, they were strengthened, money was involved, trips were made to the promised land. People who opposed had a very hard time opposing these people. And remember, at the time of Ottomans, this region of Palestine was not fully independent. It was somewhat under the Ottoman rule, but it was under a Muslim rule, Islamic rule. But in World War I broke, and people who wanted this land, they used their money and influence to get this land for themselves. As we went over, letters were written at government level, and people were convinced. Mass immigration happened over the period of time, post-World War I, all the way through the beginning of World War II. Several immigration attempts were made. As a result, the people in Palestine rioted. I am wrapping up all of these things as a reminder, because I know we went through a lot of information. That's why I'm going over this information again as a recap for everybody. So 1930s were very hard again on this land. Before World War II, these people were continuously rioting against the newcomers. And British at one point in time were so ready to withdraw themselves out, but they couldn't, because at this time there was no United Nations. So what they did, they passed some rules to control the immigration into this land of the Jewish people from the Europe who wanted to escape the persecution, or for whatever reason they wanted to move over here. But at the same time, they were deciding what to do with this land, and 1940s happened in the midst of the World War II. Right in the middle of the World War II, different moves were made on the US soil to reinstate the unlimited immigration of the Zionists into this land. And by 1947, UK, United Kingdom, gave up on this land and presented it to the UN that from this point onwards, you take care of this land. And when that happened, as soon as UK withdrew its support, Israel said, that's it, I will declare my independence. Conflict happened. Several Palestinians were killed, and continuous wars started from 1948 till this day. And slowly and gradually, we see that in the map, as I showed you earlier on, that how the Palestine is shrinking in size over the period of time, and how the people of Palestine do not really have a voice of their own, but they have a representation which is created by the outsider. An extremely hand-tight representation is what they have. They have revolted several times against this. Intifada has happened, which did not play well for the people of Palestine. In fact, backfired them, and they were even pushed back further. They do not have access to a lot of basic needs that other peoples get to enjoy. A lot of the Palestinians still to this day have been living in Jordan in camps. They do not have the same status in the Jordan as the Jordanian citizens. They still live as Palestinians. And again, you know, these people are going through a lot in the last 70 some years. So we have now come down to this, what we are facing now in 2023, as these things are happening. Anyway, so I will now open this for any questions if you guys have about this particular thing. I've given you a brief overview of the history of last 3,000 some years. And yes, it's getting recorded for anybody who asked. So we'll make the recording available later on.